The evening air in Sunnyvale Acres carried that thick Tennessee humidity that made every blade of grass feel like it belonged to the HOA instead of you. Our annual Community Unity potluck was in full swing on the common green, folding tables stretching end to end with plastic chairs added like an afterthought. Everyone was already halfway through their potato salad by the time I stepped onto the grass in my plain navy blouse. Velma Huxley stood at the center like a preacher in pastel cardigan, laughing with a mouthful of cornbread, waving her clipboard like she was conducting an orchestra of obedience. Neighbors leaned in when she spoke, as if proximity to her voice meant you were still in good standing. I sat toward the edge of the table, not quite at the kids' folding chairs, but close enough to feel invisible. "Sweet tea, Teresa?" Velma called from the head, voice syrupy. I smiled. "Just water." No one asked why. No one ever did. Then came the toast. Velma rose, glass raised high. "To Wade, our treasurer extraordinaire. You've always been the strong one, Wade. You keep this entire neighborhood running like clockwork." Everyone clapped. I didn't. I smiled, though, because sometimes smiling is easier than explaining why you didn't. That smile, they always mistook it for agreement, for compliance. But it wasn't either. It was a placeholder, something to wear until the words I really wanted came together. Earlier that day, I'd wired another $2,000 into the HOA emergency fund account. Again. "Rent for the common pool repair with love, your neighbor," I wrote in the memo line every single month. Never once got a reply. Not a thank you, not a receipt, not even a thumbs up emoji. Once I'd asked Velma if I should just send it directly to the association account. She looked up from her rule book and said, "Just send it to Wade. It's easier that way. Easier." I sat at that potluck table, pulled out my phone beneath the checker cloth, and scrolled. 36 transfers. No replies, no acknowledgments, just silence padded with perfectly trimmed hedges. Funny how easier turned into invisible without anyone noticing. The potluck rolled on, and Velma came around with a basket of hand-folded napkins shaped like little daisies, the kind she used for every HOA celebration. She laid one gently on Wade's plate, kissed his shoulder. "Guest of honor today," she said. My napkin got rolled like a cheap utensil. People noticed. They smiled at the gesture. One of the ants from Block C clucked, "That's real leadership, right there." I held mine loosely in my lap. Wade laughed, raised his glass, said something about neighbors sticking together through thick and thin. I tuned it out. My thoughts were louder. Sometimes it's the little things like a napkin or the silence after your name is skipped that say the loudest truths. I didn't say a word, not because I was scared, because I was deliberate. It had been like this for years. Every time the HOA faced a shortfall, leaky roof on the clubhouse, cracked sidewalks, that time the pool filter died, I offered help and they let Wade hold the receipt. Every win, he wore like a badge sewn from my labor. And I just nodded along. But see, silence isn't submission, it's strategy. Let them talk. Let them toast. I was listening. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my laptop open, scrolling through bank records. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I began compiling. Not for a fight, for truth. Not revenge, just recalibration. As the night wore on, I went back to help clean up the common area. My plate was untouched. Wade cracked another joke about how some people can't cook and save money at the same time. Good thing we've got real leaders. Everyone laughed again. I smiled, but this time it wasn't polite. I woke up before the sun. The neighborhood was too quiet, the kind of quiet that meant someone was already up enforcing rules on purpose. I sat up in my perfectly compliant house and looked around. Everything was still there. The bookshelf with HOA-approved neutral spines. The curtains exactly 2 inches from the floor per covenant 4.2. The yellow roses I planted, exactly 3 per bush, no more, no less. It didn't feel cheerful anymore. It felt like a museum dedicated to someone I stopped being years ago. Voices drifted from the clubhouse patio, low and familiar. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but my name landed like a fine notice on glass. She's not as polished in real life as she is on the resident portal. Huh. Aunt Cheryl chuckled. Velma didn't laugh. She didn't correct her either. She's just different, she said, soft but final. Different. That word again. I stared at my perfectly mowed lawn like it might say something back. I'm not different. I'm just not what they wanted. I slipped outside in a shirt too thin for the chill. The cold bit at my arms, but I needed air. I pulled my phone out and tap call to Velma. I just wanted to see. She picked up. Oh, hey, Teresa. Wade's calling on the other line about the new flagpole fund. Let me call you back. The line went dead. She never called back. She never did. It wasn't the first time. There had been a dozen versions of that over the years. Texts left on read. Voicemails ignored. Messages seen, but never answered. It used to bother me. Now I just understood it for what it was, a pattern. And patterns once seen are hard to unsee. I walked back inside past the clubhouse without looking in. The heat from the grill hit me in the face, but it didn't thaw anything. I moved through the neighborhood like I didn't live there, like I never had. By late morning, Wade showed up like he was returning from a war zone. Car keys jangling, phone pressed to his ear, voice just a little too loud. Yeah, circle back with me next week on that fence variance. Tell Jason we're not moving until Q4. Velma rushed over with a fresh plate of biscuits. Wade, sit down. I just made your favorite. Dale laughed at some offhand comment about residents with no plan, and Wade grinned like a man who never needed one. He patted my shoulder as he passed. Still doing that finance thing? I nodded. Still pretending to be in meetings. He didn't hear me. Or maybe he chose not to. My phone buzzed. Maris, how's the HOA circus? I stared at the screen, then slid it back into my pocket. Not yet. After lunch, I found myself alone in the clubhouse kitchen again, elbow deep in suds, scrubbing dishes I didn't dirty. The sink water was too hot, but I didn't adjust the tap. It wasn't about the dishes. It never was. I thought about how often I fell into this, moving through their mess like it was mine to fix. Not out of love, but out of muscle memory. No one asked me to wash anything. No one had to. Sometimes the problem isn't what they do. It's what I never stopped them from doing. I dried the last plate, set it down carefully, and looked up at the hallway mirror just beyond the kitchen. My face was clean, but I still felt stained. I whispered to my reflection, next time he calls, I'm not answering either. It wasn't bitterness. Not anymore. It was the beginning of something different. Not revenge, just self-respect. Sunday morning slipped in through the oak trees like it always had. Quiet, steady, too familiar. I laced up my sneakers and left the house before anyone stirred. I didn't need breakfast. I needed space. The sidewalks curved through the neighborhood like a memory you keep walking into. 2 kids were riding scooters up the hill, their mom trotting behind with a coffee in one hand and a sweatshirt in the other. She yelled something about helmets, and they groaned in unison. I smiled just barely. Then I felt it, that pull in my chest, not from longing, from remembering. The first time I wired money to help the HOA, it wasn't because they asked. It was because they didn't. The pool filter had died. Wade forgot to budget. I sent it before they even told the residents. No one said thank you. That's what made it worse. Later that afternoon, I was back in my house, kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and sat down at my desk. I didn't open work emails. I opened something else. A folder on my desktop titled, For the Board. Inside, every transfer I'd ever sent. PDFs, screenshots, digital notes. October, clubhouse roof patch. November, sidewalk repairs. December, holiday lights that Wade later claimed he personally funded. Dozens of them. Every note tagged the same. Community fund, love, Teresa. Not a single reply in return. Not an email, not a call, not even a text that said, got it. I kept scrolling. One transfer showed Wade forwarding my message to Velma, sent for us this month. He didn't even change the wording. Just passed it along like a gift-wrapped lie. How many times had I done that? Sent money, sent help without asking for anything back, and watched someone else collect the applause. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in increments. $1 here, a moment there. Eventually, they stopped seeing it as help and started calling it her duty. No one stole from me. I gave it, but they took the credit anyway, and I let them. The sky was turning pink when I drove back down to the clubhouse for the next small gathering. A neighbor's retirement or HOA committee, I don't remember. I stood in the foyer while Velma gave someone a tour of the new framed wall. She pointed out photos like she was listing trophies. One large frame caught my eye. Taken during last year's Labor Day barbecue. I remember that photo. I set up the tripod, hit the timer, ran into the shot, and in the print my face was cropped out. "Why'd you cut this version?" I asked casually, almost like a joke. Velma didn't flinch. "You look tired in that one." I nodded. "Right?" They always picked the version of me that suited their story. After they all shuffled outside to prep the grill, I stayed behind, sat on the couch under that photo, staring at the corner where my shoulder barely made the frame. Just a piece of fabric, not a person. The camera that took that picture? I bought it with my end-of-year bonus, wrapped it in a red bow, gave it to the board for community memories. I thought they'd say something. They just said, "Hope it's out of Zoom." Not ungrateful, just uninterested. Now my face was gone from the wall, and no one seemed to notice it had ever been there. I didn't cry. That part of me was done. I pulled out my phone and opened my bank app again. Scrolled to that folder. I tapped rename, changed it from for the board to for me. I used to think they just forgot to thank me. Now I wonder if they ever even saw me. Dinner was quieter than the night before. Not because there were fewer people. The clubhouse still held voices, footsteps, the clinking of dishes, but the noise didn't reach me this time. I was there, but not part of it. We just finished the roast when Velma pulled out a small wrapped box from the buffet. "Look what Wade got us," she said, holding it up like a prize on display. It just arrived today. The wrapping was familiar, simple craft paper, dark green ribbon, a small card tucked under the knot. I felt it before I saw it. She opened the box carefully, pulling out a sleek digital photo frame already running a loop of community memories. Last year's barbecue, Wade's leadership at the pool party, the holiday lights. None recent, all carefully chosen. "He always thinks of the sweetest things," she beamed, nudging Dale. Wade smiled like someone who just received a standing ovation for reading someone else's script. I knew that frame not because of the pictures, but because I bought it 3 months ago, ordered it, selected those exact photos. I'd recorded a note to the vendor to preload them, even added my name to the file metadata. I hadn't told anyone. It was supposed to be a quiet gesture. Instead, it arrived here, wrapped the same way, but with a different card, one signed from Wade. He didn't flinch. It slid out of him like he'd rehearsed it. I didn't say a word, not yet, but something shifted in my chest. Later that evening, I stepped past the kitchen, headed for the porch when I heard Velma's voice from around the corner. She was on the phone, performative tone in full swing. "Oh, Wade's the one who keeps this neighborhood going. I don't know where we'd be without him." Then a pause, laughter, and the next part sharp as a fine. "Teresa? She's just there. She has her own life. Just there. Not unhelpful, not selfish, just there." I didn't interrupt. I didn't storm in. I stood in the hallway and let the words burn through me like slow acid. You can argue with hate, but what do you do with an eraser? I stepped outside, let the door shut softly. Wade was sitting on the porch swing, scrolling through his phone. I sat down beside him. "Do you even realize? You're letting them give you credit for everything I do." He glanced at me, squinting. "What's the difference? It all stays in the community." That was it. That was all he had. I stood up, looked through the window at the living room wall, the photo display. None of those pictures were mine. Not the ones I took, not the ones I loved, only the ones they'd chosen, the ones where Wade was in the center and I was at the edge or cropped out altogether. They didn't just misunderstand me. They'd rewritten me into a version they could stomach. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't slam doors. I walked back inside and began collecting the parts of myself I could still reach. A book I'd gifted the clubhouse library 2 Christmases ago, untouched. A scarf Velma said she'd wear to the next meeting, never did. The frame, still blinking. I unplugged it without a word. It was subtle, controlled, but inside I was done handing over my presents like a donation. Before I left, I opened the empty box the frame had come in. Slip a small card inside. It read, "Just remember the version you love was built with money you never asked where it came from." File 3. I stayed up that night longer than I meant to. The neighborhood had gone quiet. TV off, doors shut, lights out in every house except the clubhouse. I didn't want sleep. I wanted clarity. I sat at my kitchen table with the overhead light humming low, pulling out a worn folder from the bottom of my bag. It had been tucked under travel receipts and a box of Band-Aids. Almost like I didn't want to admit I kept it on me. Inside was a copy of the HOA ledger I'd scanned 2 years ago to help organize digitally. Velma never used the file, kept scribbling on the physical version like it was gospel. I skimmed the latest entries. Wade, $0. Teresa will cover eventually. I stare at that line, not at the dollar signs, but at the assumption that I was a given, not a gift, that I owed the community some undefined debt just for being steady, just for not being a problem. My chest didn't hurt. Not exactly. It went numb like the feeling you get when your fingers fall asleep, but in your rib cage. I whispered into the air, no one around to hear. I'm a line item with a payment plan. Monday came with sun cutting through the blinds. I hadn't left the table all night. By late morning, Velma invited her friend Nancy over to drop off a casserole. I stayed back wearing an old hoodie, unshowered, mine still fogged. Nancy walked in, smiled wide, looked straight at me, and said, "Oh, are you the new maintenance lady?" I froze mid-step. Velma chuckled soft, almost like a hiccup, then changed the subject without correcting her. Nancy eventually apologized, said she felt so embarrassed, and I just smiled and said, "Don't worry, it happens." But inside I didn't feel overlooked. I felt erased, not just because of her mistake, but because of how normal it had become. By early afternoon, I'd driven back home. My house felt smaller than usual. Not because it was cramped, because I had just spent 2 days in a place where I didn't exist unless I was useful. I sat at my desk, phone in hand, scrolling through silent text threads. When I called Maris, she answered fast. "You all right?" I didn't answer her. I just exhaled. She waited, then said, "How long are you going to keep showing up for people who don't see you?" I still didn't say much. She pressed. "You don't owe this neighborhood a life sentence just because you bought a house here." I'd heard versions of that before, but hearing it from someone who actually saw me, different. I ended the call. That night, I found an old notebook in the bottom drawer. I hadn't journaled in years. I flipped to the first blank page and wrote one line across the top. What would happen if I stopped? The pen trembled a bit. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was something else. I thought back to the first time I paid a special assessment for them. They were behind. Wade had forgotten again. I called the vendor without telling anyone, covered the entire month. Sent the receipt to Velma. No thank you. Just silence. Then expectation. And I let it happen because silence felt safer than rejection. At least when nobody says anything, you can pretend it was community spirit. I stared at the words I'd written. They looked final, like a door I was about to walk through. One last line, bold. Tomorrow, I'll say something I've never said before. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when Velma slid a manila envelope across my kitchen counter. "Before the next meeting, hun," she said, like she was handing over a grocery list. "Just need your signature here. Wade's going to help manage the common areas locally." I blinked, one hand still gripping the mug. "What is it?" "Just an update to the covenants," she smiled. "Formality stuff." I opened the folder slowly. For pages, legal format. My name crossed out in 2 places. Wade's name bolded and centered. It wasn't an update. It was a transfer. Voting proxy, emergency contacts, every legal reference that once tied my voice to this neighborhood, gone. Dale sat nearby, sipping his coffee like it was any other morning. Didn't flinch. Velma leaned on the counter. "We just thought it made more sense with you being so quiet and all." I read every line again. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. This wasn't about convenience. This was about control. And now that I wasn't needed, I was being erased. I took out my phone under the table and snapped a photo of the signature line. Then I signed it, not because I agreed, but because sometimes when they expect silence, you give them documentation instead. Afterward, I washed my hands slowly like that would rinse the part of me that had just been cut loose. Lunch prep started an hour later. Velma bustled around the clubhouse while I set out plates. "We need a photo of the board for the newsletter," she said cheerily. "Just Wade and Dale," she added. I didn't blink. I took the phone, walked outside, positioned them like props. Wade adjusted his collar. "Try not to shake this time, Teresa." Dale chimed in. "She always cuts off heads in photos." They laughed, all three of them. I lifted the phone, held it steady, smiled as I clicked, but inside I was still stuck on that paperwork with my name deleted like it never mattered. I'm always the one holding the frame, never in it. After the picture, I walked back inside without saying anything. My steps were quiet but deliberate. I went straight to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the closed toilet seat with the phone still in my hand. I opened the photo, stared at the image. Wade and Dale, arms over Velma's shoulders, glowing with pride. I saved it into a new album titled Proof. They chose. Then I sent it to Maris with 3 words. "This neighborhood was never mine." No reply came back, but none was needed. Back in the hallway, I looked around the common room one last time. The smells, the sounds, the picture frames, the space they filled without ever needing space for me. And I knew if I ever needed a reason to stop showing up, this was it. I hadn't unpacked my emotional suitcase. It sat by the door half-zipped, like even it didn't want to be here. I moved around my house slowly, not from tiredness, but from a kind of heaviness that made everything feel thick. I was drinking reheated coffee, bitter and metallic, when the email from Maris came in. Subject line, "You need to see this." I clicked. A forwarded message, originally from Velma, sent to a cousin I hadn't heard from in years. The body was short, casual. "Teresa is doing fine. We've always had to put our hopes in Wade." I read it twice, then a third time. I wasn't shocked, not really. But something in me buckled anyway. They didn't misunderstand me. They misused me. She doesn't need much. Girls like that. Stable, quiet. It's boys that need lifting. She talked about Wade like he was some sleeping giant with potential. Me, I was solid, reliable, the kind of woman who doesn't rock the boat because she's too busy patching the holes. It was a polite eraser. Sanitized, clean. I hit forward, sent it to myself with a new subject line, Exhibit A. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the silence, staring at nothing until the room felt like it was watching me back. That evening I tried cleaning. I opened the kitchen drawer and found it. A birthday card tucked into an envelope. My handwriting on the outside. I remember the ink. I pulled the card out slowly. It wasn't mine. The handwriting inside was different. "Happy birthday. Love, Wade." He'd swapped it. I stood there, one hand on the drawer, the other gripping the fake note. He didn't just steal credit. He removed me from the act entirely. I sent a picture to Maris. She responded within a minute. "That's not your handwriting. That's his." I didn't reply. I just stood there thinking about how deep the edits went. He wasn't just taking the applause. He was scrubbing me out of the story. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I opened my laptop again, created a folder titled Evidence. I began dropping everything. PDFs, screenshots, emails, receipts, gift logs, photos, messages, everything I'd ever sent, covered, funded, fixed. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt organized. They built their neighborhood narrative on my silence. Let's see how well it holds up under scrutiny. When I finally stopped, it was after midnight. My back hurt. My eyes were dry, but my hands were steady. I stared at the glowing screen for a long time, the cursor blinking at the top of the file list. Then I whispered to myself, "You erased the wrong homeowner." Saturday night came with too much noise and too little meaning. Velma called it a celebration of community unity. She even printed it on the invitations. That alone should have told me everything. When I arrived, the clubhouse was covered in photos, laminated, framed, displayed. Wade in his Treasurer of the Year pose, Wade cutting the ribbon on the new flagpole, Wade holding a baby I didn't recognize. I scanned the walls and counted exactly one photo with me in it. I was blurry in the background. They sat me at the far corner of the table, far from Velma, farther from Wade. I didn't protest. I observed. They built this table out of delusion, but I brought facts. Wade stood midway through dinner, glass raised. The room quieted immediately. Velma beamed like she knew every word before he said it. I know this year hasn't been easy, but it's reminded me what really matters: community. Aunt Cheryl whispered something sweet. Cousin Robbie nodded like a bobblehead. Wade continued. Some of us had to step up. Some of us had to hold things together. Velma added, right on cue. We don't know where we'd be without him. The room hummed with approval. Dale didn't speak, but he nodded slow and sure. Maris, standing near the hallway, caught my eye. Her look wasn't surprise. It was permission. Wade ended his toast with "We take care of our own." That was the line. I stood. Not abrupt, not theatrical, just firm. Since we're celebrating the people who hold things together, I said, walking toward the front of the room, let me show you something. I pulled my phone from my pocket, walked over to the TV mounted above the fireplace, and connected the screen share. The room hushed. My banking app opened. I tapped history. A list appeared. Dozens of lines, each one. HOA pool repair, $2,000. Clubhouse roof, $2,200. Holiday lights, love, Teresa. Wade didn't move. I turned toward the table. You clapped for him, I said. But I paid for it. All of it. Silence thickened. Dale set down his fork. Velma blinked. Aunt Cheryl glanced toward Wade, then back to me. I tapped again, pulled up email threads, forwarded receipts, timestamps, memos. One email from Wade. Hey, here's what I sent them this month. It was my transfer, my money, my note. Velma opened her mouth, then closed it. We never knew, she finally said. We thought you didn't ask. I cut in. You didn't want to know. I tapped again, opened another tab, showed email after email. Did they get the money? I'd written to Wade. No reply, only silence. Every month, silence that spoke louder than truth. And Cheryl murmured, I always wondered how he managed so well. He didn't, I said. He managed my silence. Nobody clapped now. Nobody lifted a glass. I closed the app, disconnected the screen, walked back to the table, but I didn't return to my corner. I sat down 2 seats from the head, across from Wade in clear view of Velma. No one told me to move. No one dared. You don't get to rewrite history, I said quietly, when I'm still alive to tell it. The guest room smelled like old cedar and lavender sachets that had long given up. I lay there for hours after the sun rose. Not really asleep, not ready to be awake either, just suspended. Down the hallway the clubhouse came to life. Muffled voices, a few bursts of laughter, the kind of forced cheer people use when they're trying not to mention the elephant still sitting at the table from last night. I got up, walked down barefoot, every floorboard creaking a little louder than usual. No one said anything. Some nodded. Most looked away. I reached the coffee pot. Velma passed behind me without a word. Dale offered a half smile and a throat clear, the closest he ever got to a conversation. On the fridge was a sticky note with Maris's handwriting. You did what they never expected. Stand by it. I kept my eyes on that note as I poured my coffee. We sat at the table. Quiet forks, clinking glasses. Velma finally said something, cutting through the silence with a knife dipped in sugar. Girls like you are tough. You don't need much. It landed with a soft thud. Before I could answer, my cousin Melanie put her fork down. That doesn't mean she should be erased, she said. Dale muttered. Boys carry the neighborhood name. It's different. Different. I didn't raise my voice. Funny, I said, how names can be carried by mouths that stay closed. Everyone froze. There wasn't an argument, just a long stretch of air filled with something heavier than silence. Later that morning, I stepped outside to check my phone. Notifications stacked up. Then I saw it. The HOA group chat gone. Well, not gone. I'd been removed. The new name, Huxley Heights Legacy. Profile photo, Wade and Dale shaking hands in front of the clubhouse like it was a passing of the torch. No message, no explanation. I texted Wade. Removed from the group? He replied, 3 dots then, must have been a mistake. I'll look into it. He never did. I took a screenshot and sent it to Maris. Her response, that's not a group. That's a stage. They didn't want healing. They wanted restoration of the story they liked better, the one where I was useful but not present. I went upstairs, packed slow, methodical, only what mattered. Back downstairs, I paused by the community photo wall again. Still not in any of them. I didn't cry, just thought to myself, this was the price. I knew it. I still paid it. I left a sealed envelope on the clubhouse table. Inside, a printed copy of my entire transfer history labeled in red marker. Receipts you never wanted. I opened the front door. Outside, the wind was picking up like even the air wanted to push me forward. As I stepped out, I heard Velma behind me, soft but pointed, speaking to someone else. She made her choice. I didn't turn. I just said low and steady, no. I finally made mine. The award plaque weighed nothing in my hands, but it carried every ounce of what they never saw in me. I stood on stage in my company's quarterly ceremony, smiling, shaking hands, nodding through the flash of phones and polite applause. My name had been called clearly. Leadership in Crisis, Teresa Penbrook. It wasn't just a formality. This was a real moment earned. I looked out over the room. Every face forward. Every face except the ones I wanted. Velma and Wade weren't there. I'd invited them, sent the email weeks in advance with details, a calendar link, even parking instructions. Velma replied 2 days later. Wade's kid has a recital. We'll have to miss it. That was it. Back at my house that night, I kicked off my heels and changed into a sweatshirt. The inbox pinged with new messages. One envelope icon sat bold near the bottom from my bank. At first, I thought it was a promotion. It wasn't. It was a collections notice. I opened it, reread it. My name listed as the guarantor for a line of credit I'd never opened. I sat down slowly, phone in hand, called the number. They confirmed it clearly. Yes, ma'am. Opened under this name, co-signed by you. My voice stayed calm. My hand shook. Who opened it? Primary holder is Wade Huxley. My head leaned back against the wall, and the realization dropped like a second gravity. Years ago, one of those covenant updates from Velma. I'd signed without reading it fully. Of course I had. I trusted them. They didn't just take my name. They used it as currency. The next day, I met Maris in her office with a folder full of bank letters, digital proof, timestamps, copies of everything. She didn't need long to flip through them. This is textbook fraud, she said. Matter of fact, you could press charges. I don't want revenge, I said. She looked at me over her glasses. Then what do you want? Removal. She nodded. We'll send a cease and desist today. Start a formal dispute with the bank. You'll be out of this before they can drag you back in. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt like the floor beneath me belonged to me. Later that week, my cousin Brianna called. Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. People are talking. Wade's saying you're trying to ruin him financially and emotionally. It's a lot. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded her a PDF of the debt notice and ended the call. They could talk. Let them. The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs documenting. I opened my laptop, added a new folder inside evidence named Debt Deception. On Monday morning, I got to work early. The lobby was quiet, and there was hanging on the wall, my plaque, right above the employees who inspire. I stood there longer than I meant to, not out of pride, out of confirmation. They can keep the last name. The HOA board meeting that week was anything but quiet. Velma tried to spin it, waving her clipboard like a shield. Teresa has clearly misunderstood our intentions, she said, voice dripping honey and venom. Wade sat beside her, face pale, fingers tapping the table like he was calculating how many transfers he still owed. The residents who once clapped for him now stare at their phones, scrolling through the evidence folder I'd quietly dropped into the group chat right before they removed me. One by one, the murmurs started. Wait, she paid for the new roof. All those holiday lights. And they cropped her out of the pictures? Velma's smile cracked like cheap stucco. This is all a misunderstanding. We're a family. I mean a community. I stood up calm, voice steady. Families don't forge signatures on credit lines. Communities don't erase the people who keep them standing. I slid the cease and desist across the table. Maris had already filed the bank dispute. The collections notice was gone by morning. Wade's face turned the color of unpaid dues. Velma tried one last Hail Mary. We can work this out privately. For the greater good. I laughed, short, sharp, the first real laugh in years. The greater good stopped being your shield the moment you used my name as collateral. The vote came faster than anyone expected. 3 residents stood up and called for a special election. Velma's presidency? Suspended pending investigation. Wade's treasurer role? Rescinded. The room didn't erupt in cheers. It just exhaled, like the whole neighborhood had been holding its breath for years. I didn't stay for the apologies. I didn't need them. I walked out into the sunlight, the same grass I'd paid to keep green, the same houses I'd helped repair, and for the first time they felt like mine. Not because I owned the deed, but because I finally owned my story. Weeks later, the new board sent a polite letter, on HOA letterhead, of course, offering me a seat. I declined. Politely. I'd spent enough time holding the frame. Maris and I sat on my porch swinging the day. The final bank letter arrived. Account cleared. Fraud confirmed. Wade Huxley responsible. She raised her glass of water. To the homeowner who stopped being invisible. I clinked mine against hers. To the neighborhood that finally saw me. Velma still waves from across the street when she thinks I'm looking. Wade's yard is now the one getting the weekly violation notices. Grass too long. Exactly the length mine used to be before I paid to keep it perfect. The digital photo frame still loops in the clubhouse, but someone quietly added my cropped-out face back into every picture. I don't go to the potlucks anymore. I don't need to. I sit on my porch, perfectly compliant lawn glowing in the sun, and I smile, the real kind this time. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, documented, and glowing under full bright light for the whole neighborhood to finally see. And that, dear neighbors, is how you turn an HOA Karen into just another cautionary tale.